everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be part one of a two-part video series talking all about my experience going to see a functional doctor. So I have always been somebody who's, throughout my entire life, I have always seen kind of conventional doctors. A couple of years ago, I kind of realized I wasn't getting many answers from them and decided to kind of go the more sort of holistic, natural route. But if I'm totally honest, I was kind of shooting in the dark. I was doing everything kind of on my own and a lot of trial and error. I've always been very interested to see a functional doctor. So functional doctors are known for looking more into the kind of the root cause and the underlying issues as to what might be the reason or the cause for various different health conditions that are usually kind of chronic and usually lifestyle related. Me personally, I have eczema and kind of inflammatory issues, I would say. So I have allergies and things like that. And then the second thing is also, as an adult, I've had more kind of hormonal imbalances. Those are the kind of the two key things that I wanted to go and investigate. I would say that functional doctors they're not quite in the alternative therapy route. So I wouldn't say they sit with kind of like homeopaths and naturopaths, but equally they're not quite in the accepted medical mainstream either. So they kind of sit somewhere in the middle. A lot of functional doctors are either practicing medical doctors themselves, or like the one that I saw, she actually used to be a practicing medical doctor and then she switched to become a functional doctor. I quite like that it does seem to be a little bit more evidence-based than perhaps some of the very kind of alternative therapies. Not discrediting that if that works for you, but just for me personally, that's just what I would prefer. So because functional doctors are very focused on finding the kind of underlying issues and the root causes, the first thing you'll do is that you will have to fill out a very, very long questionnaire that will ask you all sorts of things about your past medical history, your family history, significant events in your life, as well as kind of your emotional and your mental well-being. They'll get a really good understanding of your overall functional profile. Then they'll look at that, and often what you'll do is lots and lots of different tests. So that'll be things like stool tests and blood tests, and then they'll kind of connect the dots and start looking into how one thing affects another, and then how you can kind of move forward in terms of addressing those different issues. So because I had both skin issues, allergies, as well as kind of hormonal health, the main suggestion there is that I definitely had some kind of issues with my digestion and my gut health. So that is going to be part one of this video series. The second part then is going to be looking more specifically and focused on the kind of the hormones and the hormonal tests that I did and all the different protocols that I did in order to address these issues as well. So before we jump in, if you could just hit the like button, I would really appreciate that. If you like the video, obviously, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you want to hit the bell notification button, you also won't miss when I come out with a new video. So the first thing I want to do is talk through all the investigations I did that has to do with my gut and my digestion. So the different issues, I suppose, that I had, they all kind of suggest that I would have some kind of imbalances. So it was quite interesting to see all the different tests and all the different results. So we're going to talk through some of those right now. In terms of the actual tests I did, so I did 4 that I can remember. So the first one was a microbiome test. So that was essentially just like a stool test, and they'll look at all sorts of different things in your stool and give you kind of a bit of an overview of the status of your gut health is at any one time. I also did a burp test, which was to test the stomach acid levels. And then I also did a screening questionnaire for candida. And finally, I also did a blood test, which was supposed to test the kind of intolerances that I have. The blood test specifically was for the IgG antibody. I know some of you might have some things to say about that, and I certainly do as well, but we'll get onto that. But those are the 4 tests that I did, just to kind of let you know. So the first thing we will talk through is the microbiome testing, because I think this one was the one that I found was kind of the most eye-opening. I'd say some of the things weren't super surprising, but there were definitely a few things that I found that were very unexpected, I would say. So as I talked through this was a little while ago now. It was almost like a year ago that I did this, so I might get some of the details a little bit fuzzy. So the first thing I get with this test is I would get like a dashboard, and as you can see, I didn't have super high need support for any one thing, but I had like a moderate need for most things, pretty much everything except for one. The 4 pillars are maldigestion, inflammation, dysbiosis, metabolic imbalance, and infection. So the first thing we can look at here is the commensal abundance. So this basically looks at the diversity of your microbiome. If you have a very unhealthy diet, often people who eat very standardized Western diets, they'll be on the more deficient side, meaning that they don't have very good gut diversity, which is not very good for you. Healthy cohort would be somewhere in the middle, but I'm actually on the much higher sides, which can indicate two things: either that I have potential bacterial overgrowth, or that I am just supplementing with a lot of probiotics, which I wasn't at the time. So if we go down here, we look at the dysbiosis pattern, which is basically indicating that I have very low inflammation score, but I do have a sort of moderate in the immune suppression, which shows that I have relatively, or I most likely don't have great barrier function in my gut. This was one thing I was like, that doesn't really surprise me. I kind of know this. We can see here again, I was pretty imbalanced, I would say. Again, it just kind of links back to the fact that I had too much bacteria, bacterial overgrowth, potentially also poor barrier function. Here, in terms of like the different species, I was kind of relatively fine with that. But then if we kind of move a bit further down, so this I thought was really quite interesting. This is basically kind of showing the different levels of fats and other metabolites in your stool. And I had very, very high levels of fats, which means that I'm not actually digesting them. So this I thought was really interesting, because I've mentioned many, many times before that I have naturally very dry skin, and I have naturally very dry hair and very dry nails. This then makes total sense. So basically what this is suggesting is that I'm not absorbing the fats that I'm eating very well. So all the fats that I kind of do eat, I kind of excrete out for whatever reason. So I thought that that was quite interesting, poor fat absorption. It also has a poor short chain fatty acid absorption as well. So short chain fatty acids are essentially all the things that kind of get broken down when you eat lots of fiber. So they're really, really good for you. And you want to be able to absorb short chain fatty acids. They're essentially a lot of the nutrients that you get from a lot of kind of the healthy plant foods. My body, for some reason, doesn't really break these down or absorb these very well. So this was also something that I would need to address. So this I don't really know. I think this is just looking at various different strains of bacteria in the gut. Again, I'm guessing this is linking back to the kind of the overgrowth and the dysbiosis. So this one I thought was really interesting. We look here now at the gastrointestinal microbiome culture. So looking at all the different species of the bacteria that you should have in your gut. And for most of them, I was totally healthy, except for here, you can see it says Lactobacillus spp, and I have nothing. I have no lactobacillus. When she said this, she was like, oh, this is quite weird. Like, I don't normally see somebody have no lactobacillus. And if you've ever taken a probiotic, you can normally see that lactobacillus is a pretty key strain that you need. You need it for your immune system, you need it for all sorts of different things. For some reason, I don't have any of that in my gut. So that I thought was really, really interesting. And I guess it would explain a lot if that is a big and important bacterial strain when it comes to your immune system. And then finally here, they looked at the kind of parasites and if there were parasites in my gut, and apparently there was this blastocystis. So who knows where I would have picked that up. We talked about the fact that obviously I've traveled a lot. I have at times had food poisoning. It could have been that time. It turns out it's actually quite a common parasite, and some people have absolutely no symptoms whatsoever. But obviously I do have various different health issues, so it would probably be worth addressing that parasite. 5 key takeaways from the microbiome test. So that was the bacterial overgrowth and poor barrier function, the poor fat absorption, the poor short chain fatty acid breakdown, no lactobacillus, and the parasite. So I think the next thing I want to talk about is the Burp test and the screening questionnaire. So in terms of the Burp test, apparently I also have quite low stomach acid, which might then be contributing to the fact that I'm not breaking down things like fats properly. And then I also did a screening questionnaire for candida, which is essentially just like a kind of a yes/no questionnaire of various different symptoms. And the score that I got from that suggested that I might, or actually most likely, have a kind of a yeast infection. However, I would say I've done other tests for this, which said the opposite. So don't know how reliable that one is. Okay, so the other test that I did was a food intolerance test. Let me just preface this. So IgG is a type of antibody. The theory is behind these tests that if you are producing a lot of these antibodies to different foods, then it means that you have an intolerance or a sensitivity to that food. I must say that this is definitely not a medically accepted test. You might ask why I even bothered doing this test, and it's a good question, but I was just kind of quite interested to see. I would say that the results, though, they definitely do kind of indicate that the most likely thing is that, you know, you produce these IgG antibodies to things that you eat a lot of, and it's not necessarily a sign of an intolerance. So just to kind of let you know that I am very aware of this. Just while we're going through tests, I did the test, so let's have a look at it anyway. Basically anything that is red is supposedly an intolerance. So I think the main thing here is we can see cereals containing gluten. So this was the kind of the key thing that my doctor said, is that I should be cutting out gluten. I have heard this anyway outside of this test, because gluten might have some kind of damaging effect on people who have poor barrier function, because there's a certain protein in it. Again, like, I haven't cut out gluten very religiously, because again, I'm a little bit skeptical about all these intolerance tests and things like that, and I don't feel like necessarily that I get flare-ups or anything from eating gluten. But then again, obviously I do have some issues with my gut, so maybe I should. I think after pregnancy, I will definitely start looking into just kind of giving it a go and seeing if I cut out gluten, what kind of happens. I have done it previously and it hasn't really done that much. So we can see here cereals containing gluten, and it's a spelt. And I was very, very highly reactive to spelt. Now, it is interesting to note here though that I was eating a muesli that had spelt grains in it. So again, that kind of connects quite well into the idea that actually this doesn't really tell you what you're intolerant to, it just tells you what you eat a lot of. So I'd had breakfast with spelt in it, and then I did the test, and obviously this is what came out. And also some of the things are quite weird, so things like milk products to that sort of a moderate rating, but then I would say things like cheese and yogurt, so sour produce, I know that I'm reactive to, and that one didn't come back as reactive. So a little bit inconsistent there. Chicken, eggs, I've never had an issue with eggs at all. I would say at the time I was eating quite a lot of them, it showed that I had a very high intolerance to them. And then I had a whole bunch of vegetables that apparently I'm intolerant to, sorry, like broccoli and carrots. I eat a lot of broccoli and carrots. Like I said, I'm not looking too seriously into these intolerance tests because they're not super reliable, and they are not, like I said, they're not accepted in mainstream science. I think if they were part of like kind of accepted medical protocol, all the doctors would be administering these, but they're not. So those are all the different investigations and tests that I did for my gut and for my digestion. After that, we were looking into how do we actually sort of start to address some of these issues. So usually when you go to a functional doctor, they will take you through various different protocols and phases. So the first one in my instance was kind of clearing out the parasite and helping to kind of get rid of some of the bad bacteria. And then we kind of move into resupplementing and reconstituting the microbiome. The main way that you do these treatments and these protocols is through the food that you're eating, and also loads and loads of different supplements. So I think at some point I was taking like 15 different capsules every single day. But the main thing, like I mentioned, is we had the kind of the 5 key issues that we wanted to address and the 5 key protocols that we would follow. So the first one was to get rid of the parasite. The second one was to supplement with digestive enzymes to kind of help with that breakdown of the fats. Third one, rebalancing the gut. Fourth was a super strong probiotic, and that was mostly to add back in some of the lactobacillus and some of the things that I was missing. And then finally some extra support in terms of the fat, so things like omega-3s and multivitamins. I actually didn't get to see her that long because I actually ended up getting pregnant quite quickly, and then we didn't want to be taking lots of weird supplements that haven't been tested with pregnancies. But on the whole, I would say that there were some quite interesting results after that. I don't know if it really necessarily helped things like my skin, but I certainly would say that things like the digestive enzymes, I could feel a difference on those. I don't know if I necessarily felt a difference when I take the super strong probiotic, but it feels good to know that at least I'm sort of supplementing with something that I should have naturally. So I think that wraps up part 1. If you have any questions about anything that I've talked about today, then please do leave a comment in the comment section down below. I hope you're keeping super well. Like I said before, if you haven't already, please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Bye.